So as we end our quarter, this is our moment to remember why Professor Charu has constantly told you this is a class in economics. This is not a class in math, even though we have graphs and we have pictures and we have equations, and I have tested you on that. The reason is a graph is as good as the story it tells. So our aim is to not look at this and say equation, curves cross. As we did in the last class, the P here is a completely different P. It's a price level. The Y here is not a Q. In an individual market like apples or oranges, it's the total level of output. The aggregate supply curve is a completely different kind of curve compared to a supply curve and an individual market. So how we think of its shape and its location is very different. And the aggregate demand curve is similarly very different than your individual market demand curve that you encountered when you started micro 2 quarters ago, ages ago, and you just thought supply demand, because this is a very different type of curve with very different type of assumptions and behavior. Axes are different, curves have different meanings, logic of their shapes are different, explanations are different, because we're in a macro world. And so now we're going to use these curves to tell stories, but they're going to be macro stories. They're not going to be micro stories. We're going to shift curves, but when we shift curves, it's not the same thing as what we did when we said shift in the demand curve because income went up, or because price of competitive goods went up, or because substitutes became cheaper, or because complements became affordable. Now, similarly, on the supply side, we are no longer talking about an individual firm saying, I got better technology, I became more competitive, I entered the market and I had a better technique than some other industry, apples is more profitable than oranges, whatever. So these are very different curves with very different logics and different meanings for both price and output level, quantity, and different meanings for what it means to be at a point at one of these curves. So keeping that in mind, we can now think about how to deploy this visual storytelling. This is where we started. The Economist is a visual storyteller. We use graphs to tell stories. What matters is the story we are telling and what kind of graph you're seeing. So let us tell a few stories.